Am I in frame?
See the frame? We're in frame.
We're live?
We're live.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Creative Collective Show. I'm your host, Dan.
I'm Zach.
And today we are with another guest. We are just pumping out podcasts like a Nerf gun.
A Nerf gun.
Do you like that?
I
I saw a bunch of Nerf guns when we bought those board games the other night, and I was like, dude, I think we might want to get some for this office.
Nerf gun wars.
Yeah.
Are you in?
I'm in.
She's in.
Played a lot of that back in my day.
So today we are with Kaitlyn. Thank you so much for joining us, Kaitlyn. I appreciate that.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Hell yeah.
So let's kick it off real quick. If you guys haven't already, hit that subscribe button. We really appreciate it when you subscribe and leave us reviews on Apple Podcasts. It lets us know how we're doing and how we can improve. Or if you guys have any suggested guests, feel free to shoot us an email at info@strixmedia.com. If you're watching on YouTube, Twitch, or Facebook, comment #live so we know that you're watching because we want to know. We just want to say hi. And if you also are watching on any of the live stream platforms, feel free to ask us a question so we can ask our guest and hopefully we can get that answered for you guys. Also, if you are a creator in the New York, New Jersey area, we have a Facebook group called NJ/NYC Creative Collective. It's a Facebook group specifically made for creators to connect, collaborate, and hire each other, get constructive criticism. I always trip up on that.
It's novel.
And really just, just connect. We throw different types of networking events as well as workshops that are geared towards creators. We have a law event coming up that is going to go into LLC formation and things like that. This probably won't come out on the podcast before that, but if you're watching live, check out the Law 101 event. It's definitely going to be something that you're going to want to attend if you are just getting started or you're in business already, and that's about it.
Yeah, she dropped some fire knowledge on our last podcast. We learned a lot, and so I can't imagine how much we're going to learn when we have her down for how long is it going to be?
I think it's going to be about an hour.
Okay.
And then she's going to do some Q&A. So
hell yeah.
That'll be exciting and scary at the same time. Don't be scared, though.
Don't be scared.
All right, so let's get in it. Kaitlyn, tell everyone who you are and what you do.
Yeah, let's do this. So my name's Caitlyn. I'm with Clover Event Co, the owner of Clover Event Co, and we are a Philly-based wedding planning business. So we definitely go all throughout the tri-state area, and we do wedding planning. We do wedding planning, wedding styling, day of coordination. A lot of people ask us if we do corporate nonprofit, but we mostly really have focused our energy over the last couple of years primarily on weddings. And we love them. We're weddings all day, every day, and most weekends too.
Wow. Holy shit.
Yeah.
Okay. So for our listeners, I just want to put it in perspective. How old are you right now?
Sure. So I'm 31. I'll be 32 in May.
Okay. I just turned 30 in October.
Nice.
So we're on the
Welcome
same page.
to the 30s club.
I know.
Yeah,
it's
a good
so
one.
crazy.
It's crazy.
I kind of feel old, but I kind of don't. I still feel like I'm 17. It's weird.
Same.
Okay. So let's get into your story. I want to know how you got into the space, how this whole thing started, but let's take it all the way back. Let's go back to when, Kaitlyn was very little and, your passion and a whole nine.
Let's
absolutely.
talk about the whole roadmap. Quick backstory. I was raised in northeastern PA in the Wilkes-Barre Scranton area. So a lot of people know The Office, that whole region. So grew up there. And honestly, I know it sounds super cheesy, but ever since I was little, my parents and family friends used to just always say, you should be a wedding planner. And even that little, I thought, that's not a real thing. You can't get paid to do that. That's not a job. So obviously didn't think it was a reality. But, in high school and stuff, I played a lot of sports and I was on, committees and all that jazz. And I was always responsible for planning all of our proms and all, the decor for them and selling the tickets. I was definitely one of those people. And so I always was kind of in the nature of hosting parties, hosting proms, kind of being the a little bit social. So I always liked that and always kind of got into that planning process. Went off to college at University of Delaware, studied communications, marketing, journalism, PR, that whole field, and wrote a long time for the newspaper, got into more magazine journalism, but also while there planned a lot of fashion shows and different events for sports teams I was on as well. So I always was kind of the one planning things, organizing friends, organizing those activities. And after college, worked for a while in PR and marketing, but at the same time, kind of always thought back on that whole wedding planning field that everybody told me I should get into. And the first thing after college was, well, how do you get into that? How do you become a wedding planner?
Yeah.
It seems like you can't just major in wedding planning. This is not a real thing.
Exactly. So what did you go to school? Like, what was your major?
Sure.
in?
My major was like mass communications, and then I minored in journalism and leadership. So I was a little bit of everything. I did PR, marketing, journalism, a little bit of everything, but kind of always dabbled in the events. There is a program at Delaware and a lot of other schools called Hotel, Restaurant, Institutional Management, which is what a lot of people that become wedding planners end up starting with, which looking back now is probably something I should have done at the time.
Is that like hospitality?
Yeah, essentially hospitality. So a lot of schools, especially ones local to like Philly, New York, and New Jersey areas, a lot of them have hospitality programs. But at the time, I didn't want to work in the restaurant industry. I didn't want to work at a hotel. So that also, and I didn't know that I wanted to be a wedding planner, which is something that was always kind of the back of my head. I thought I was going to more be a journalist or, a PR, PR person, or kind of go more in that field. And looking back on it in a good way, I'm glad I didn't go just that track either, because it kind of opened me up to other things. But yeah, when I graduated college, it was, okay, how do you even become a wedding planner if that's something I actually want to do? So I started interviewing, I was 22, calling random wedding planners and saying, hey, how do you do this? And how did you get started? And that's one thing I push for too. I coach a lot and mentor a lot of, recent grads and people still in college. And one thing I'm a really big fan of is informational interviews. I do them all the time with people. And so if you have somebody that is in a job that you want and you want to know how they got there, most people are very willing to talk about that with you. And even if they don't have a job to offer you, I'm a really big fan of saying, hey, I want to work at StrixMedia. How does this work? How did you guys do this? What did you do? And just like you would probably agree, you'd be fine having that conversation with somebody, especially like seeing if somebody will talk to you quick on their lunch break, or not that most of us take lunch breaks, we work in this industry, but most people will give you even 10, 15 minutes of their time on the phone. So I started calling planners and saying, how did you get into this?
So how do you go about finding those people?
Great question. Yeah, I just started searching and, Philly-based wedding planners and who does
like
this.
Like on Google or through
just
Instagram?
Google. Yeah,
Okay.
Instagram didn't really exist when I started this 10 years ago. So back in 2010, it wasn't a big thing. So yeah, I just started searching on Google back then. It was really the main form of research back then. And yeah, I started talking to people and, kind of getting an interest in how does this happen. And at the time, there was this big program at Temple that was like a wedding planning certificate program that was, just like a post-grad thing. It's not a master's program or anything fancy. It's just a certificate program. So I decided to take it as a way just to sort of get my feet in the door, and also just to sort of know, a little bit more about the industry. So it was taught by other professionals. It still goes on at Temple, and I'm sure other local schools have the same programs. And it was just like a 3-month program, but it started giving me a little bit more knowledge on that stuff that I would have learned in a hospitality, degree. And so it taught me a little bit about catering and about how tents work and how to start a business and just sort of how the wedding planning world works. So that was a good way to kind of get into the industry. And I interned for a couple wedding planners during that time that I had met in the program and started just doing basic office work, like researching, getting quotes from them and proposals and all of that. And then very quickly after that, after I graduated from that program, I started working with another wedding planning company in the region and started assisting them, and then pretty quickly started leading weddings with them too. So I was having my own clients at a pretty young age, which was great to kind of get that knowledge and got a lot of good experience. But I always kind of knew in the back of my head I probably wanted to have my own business. And I think there's two kinds of people out there. There's people that want to have their own business and have that skill set, and people who really want to help other small businesses grow and be on that team. And I think you're kind of either one of those people. And I think that's one thing that a lot of people think, oh, I want to be entrepreneurial, and they think that only way to do that is to have your own business. But I think you really have to be aware of what kind of person you are. Are you somebody, quite frankly, that is a workaholic, that can put in the work to own your own business? Or are you somebody who really wants to be able to put in a lot of work and is a great worker, but at the end of the day wants to shut off? Then maybe you're somebody who's going to be really great working for another business. So I always knew I was
That's a good point.
And I'm sure you guys know that, having your own business too. Yeah. And there's nothing wrong with either one. You just have to be really aware of which type of personality that you are. And I kind of always knew I was the first. I wanted to build something. I wanted to have something that was my own, and I knew I thought I had the skill set to be able to do that. And so after working with another planner for 4 or so years, I started Clover back in 2015. And really, there was a couple wedding planners in Philly at the time, but honestly, it's since the scene's kind of blown up in a good way, and there's some amazing other wedding planners we work with often too. So I started Clover in 2015. Started really small, started doing friends' weddings, as most wedding planners start, just sort of putting your name out there and saying, hey, I'm doing this now, and started doing friends' weddings and kind of slowly grew up from there.
So a quick question with that. Mm-hmm. How did you transition from working as an event planner under someone
Sure.
else to doing it? Like, were you building up a side hustle at the same time?
Great question. Yeah, so there's a whole other story to this. So as I mentioned, my earlier, studies were more in marketing, PR, communication. So after college, I worked at a PR firm for a short time, and then I moved on to working for the Manayunk Development Corporation, which is in Philadelphia. The Manayunk Development Corporation.
Okay.
So in Philadelphia, there's a neighborhood called Manayunk. It's a nonprofit there that basically runs the town. So I was the head of marketing and events there.
Cool.
So I did all of their marketing events. So I did their graphic design, their website, their social media, and then I did all of their event planning. So we did large festivals. So there's the big Manayunk Arts Festival with 300 artists that line Main Street in June. There's food truck festivals. There's music festivals. So I did all of those. So that's really where also I got a lot of event experience.
Love food truck festivals.
Yeah, can't go wrong with those, right? So a lot of my event experience came from doing events with 200,000 people and working with shutting down streets, popping up a million tents, rentals, logistics.
It sounds like Morristown partnership. Very similar.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like most towns have an organization like this. So go ahead. Do you have a question?
Yeah. Can we go a little more into
Yeah.
because honestly, event planning is very above my head.
Yeah.
Like in terms of like figuring out like streets and coordinating people.
Yep.
Like what was that like in terms of getting that experience? Was there any struggles along the way of doing that? Like what did that look like?
Sure. Yeah. So again, the good thing about that position was it's with a small nonprofit. So I'm also a really big fan of people try to look for these really big businesses to work for, and that's great to work for big agencies and big companies. But I'm sure, as you guys know too, you get the most experience working for small businesses because you really have to dive in and do the work.
You wear all the hats.
You wear all the hats, literally every hat. So I was 23 and had one boss above me and was able to do not whatever I want obviously with her approval, but I had this amazing mentor in that position, and I was able to just kind of take it, and she trusted me to say, hey, how would you do this? So kind of revamped the way we did events, kind of was able to take it on my own and say, I don't know, this seems like a better way to do it. What if we organize it this way? What if we do that? And so it really allowed me to learn the ins and outs of that type of event industry, and that was more the festival and like event side of it. Obviously, weddings are a little bit of a different beast, which we can talk about next too.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it was like, chalking off the street in the middle of the night to like make sure the vendors were all, in the right, spots, and there was 10 by 10 spaces for each tent that had to go. It's I had to be there at 2 a.m. on festival days for the rentals to be delivered and be there for, working 40 hours in one weekend. So it really was able to throw me into getting to know what work needs to go into making these events happen.
So you were like boots on the ground. You weren't just facilitating.
No, I was not. Yeah, I was planning them and then executing day of too, with just like interns and volunteers.
So you mentioned a mentor, and that's something that we like to get into on this show. So you mentioned that was a mentor for that specific style of event planning. Could you talk a little bit about that mentor, and then do you have any current mentors that you now look up to, or call for advice, or
yeah,
or
absolutely.
Like
yeah, I have two mentors from that Manayunk position. Jane Lifton and Joan Denenberg, who are dear friends of mine too, and they were really big mentors to me throughout that process. Jane has been in the industry for a long time, working, in nonprofit and the event world. And then Joan actually had her own business. So she was a really big mentor to me and also thinking and talking about how to start a business. So that was a big mentor in helping me through that process. But yeah, I think mentors are extremely important. And sometimes they don't have to be directly in the exact same field that you're in. They just need to be people that you look up to in the way they, operate, the way they work, the way they live their lifestyle, and what that looks like too. So yeah, I learned a lot from them at a very young age being in that position, and certainly from other wedding industry people, learned from them as well. But yeah, I think when you start something, you need those people to be able to call. You need those people to look up to and say, hey, am I doing this right? What else should I be doing? So I'm a big fan of mentors and business coaches in general.
Cool. All right. So let's talk about this transition.
Yeah.
here.
So the transition. Yeah, I can walk you through kind of how that went. So the other beautiful thing about the amazing nonprofit, and shout out to everybody in Manayunk who might be listening.
Shout out. What up?
Yeah, lived in Manayunk for 10 years. I most recently moved out, which is so sad, but it's been home to me for a really long time, and it'll always have a special place in my heart. But yeah, the nonprofit was amazing, and because I had been there for so long, I had been there for probably 6 to 8 years or so when I started Clover.
Wow.
And so I was able to naturally sort of transition. So I had started and even when I was there, I was working with that other planner doing weddings on the side and always had that full-time job. But when I started Clover, I knew I couldn't just start and make a full-time salary doing it. So I was able to keep my full-time position at Manayunk and did weddings on the weekends, met with clients after hours, which also goes into how much time goes into it. Because I'd leave my full-time job, have meetings with clients until 10 p.m., work till midnight, 1 a.m., go back to work the next day and do it all over.
So was there any kind of like competing issues there in terms of
great question. Yeah. Luckily, my boss was really supportive and amazing and knew this was something I was interested in. And I think with any job that you have, I joke that some employers get nervous when people start their own thing. I think the best employee you can have is somebody that has a side hustle, because if they can show that they can do both of those things, as long as the work doesn't suffer and you can prove to your boss that you can do both, then I think they're an amazing asset. So what I would do is put in extra time. So if I had to leave it early for a rehearsal on a Friday, I'd stay Thursday night till 10 o'clock at the office and be the only one there finishing the work I had to do. So as long as you show the employer that you're working for that, hey, I'm committed and invested in you in this position, but I also am really passionate about this side thing that I want to do, but here's how I'm going to make up for it. And I really love the flexibility for you to work with me on that. As long as they see the results, they shouldn't have a problem with it. And that's a big lesson too, is saying, but to do that and to get the benefit of leaving early or taking a client call midday, I had to put an extra effort behind the scenes to show them that I was still, there for the role that I was hired for.
Yeah. And that like whatever you were doing for them wasn't, suffering from whatever you're doing on their side.
Exactly. And then they're more understanding. If I get a call during lunch and I'm like, hey, it's a vendor, can I take, they're not going to question if I pop out for a 10-minute phone conversation.
That's cool.
They know the work's getting done. So that's a big thing too. I think a lot of people get in the mistake of hiding their side hustle from their current employers. And I certainly understand that, but I think there's a really tricky line. A lot of people lie about it or just hide it completely. And I don't think that's great either, because when the time comes that you want to transition or leave, I think that gets a little messy. And then they're thinking this whole time you've been doing this and we didn't know. And they almost think then, well, what were you doing all those hours? Were you working on that thing and we just didn't know about it? When if you're a little bit more upfront about it and say, hey, this is still my priority, I'm here for this, but I'm also doing this other thing, they tend to be a little bit more open because you can have those more frank conversations. So I'm a big fan of being candid about it.
Yeah. So to your point, I did exactly your thing.
Yeah.
I went to school for engineering. I had an engineering job for a little bit. I was there for 4 months, six months maybe.
Yeah.
And then even before I was hired, like they asked me like, well, what do you do? I'm like, well, I also own a digital marketing agency. It takes up literally all of my time. So when I'm not here,
I'm doing that, right.
there.
Great.
Right.
This is on the interview.
Yeah.
By the way, I have no time, but I'd love for you to
But the job was only 8 to 5. I didn't have to take work home with me.
Yes,
Exactly. So it
yeah.
worked really well.
Yeah.
And what was great about that job is that there was no busy work. So if there was nothing to do, there was literally nothing to do. I can just work on like editing videos or like, reaching out to people or like, putting out fires like midday.
Which is the nice benefit if people work with you on that. So
exactly.
Yeah, and I think the beautiful thing about the job that I had is they also allowed me to transition pretty well. So when you work at a small business, also you're a little bit more valuable. So if you're a team of 3 to 5 people and you're the only one that does that thing, in a good way, you're setting yourself up for a lot more value than an agency position where they could just hire somebody else to do that job tomorrow. So the good thing, not to speak a lot of myself, but the good thing is I was kind of the only one that knew that job really well. So I was able to barter with that and transition in a way that was able to say, hey, you still need me to do these things, but now I want to really start growing Clover more. So how can we do that? Can I get somebody, I started building a team under me before I even left. But then during that transition time, I was able to go from working 40 hours full time, which listen, it's never 40 hours, even in a full-time job, but it was 40 hours, 40-hour week job to down to let me take every Friday off and I'll work, 32 hours for you. And and every Friday I'm going to use my paid time off and essentially just spread it out over the year and like rolled over days from the year before. And I took almost every single Friday off to focus on weddings and prep for the wedding and pack my car for the wedding and go to the rehearsal and all of that. And then it moved down to actually like 24 hours a week. And hey, you're going to hire somebody else to take more things, but I'm going to mentor that person. I'm going to be in the office 3 days at my desk, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and I was off every Friday, Monday. And of course, still I was on call. I'm always like working, but I was able to kind of pare down my time a little bit more to then get to the point where I actually moved to a consulting position where I was just paid hourly for a certain amount of hours of work to pop into the office or even work from home on things and just work on projects that they wanted me to work on, to the point where I finally said, okay, at a certain year I got to the point and said, okay, now I'm really ready to go full time. And while I was doing that, I was building Clover to get it to the point where it could sustain a full-time salary for myself.
But you did that really, really strategically, and I think the best possible way for yourself and for the business, right?
Exactly.
Because, like you said, you're valuable as a player on that team. And if you were to slowly make an exit, it's much easier for them to handle that.
Yes, and then it was easier for them, exactly. So we were able to build a team below me who are all still, like a lot of them are still there doing amazing things. And then they all felt secure knowing, Caitlin's still here. She's on call if we need her, but now we're transitioning her role to these other people. But I was still there for the big things and training the new people. So yeah, again, but that could have never happened if I was not upfront from the beginning of what my exit plan was and what I wanted to do next in my life. So that's why I think it's really, because your employers, if you bring them value, they don't want to lose you. And if you can use that to your advantage, I think that's a big skill that a lot of people don't take advantage of.
I love that. All right, so we heard the.
Hold on.
Boom.
Give me
the sounds, Dan.
Boom. One more time.
Real quick. If you're tuning in on Facebook Live, YouTube, or Twitch, comment. Let us know that you're here. Say hi. Comment #live. Ask us a question. It really helps more people see the stream when you guys interact with it. Hit the heart button. Hit the smiley face. I don't know what else is there. Hit the poop emoji.
All the emojis.
All right,
cool. So we heard the perspective of you weaning away from the employee side, which is a great strategy. I love that strategy. Anyone listening that wants to do a side hustle, this is probably the best, most transparent and efficient way of doing it, because you're constantly working with them and yourself in terms of like making a more flexible schedule, weaning off so like no one's rushing around waiting, and then like now everyone's disappointed because you couldn't follow through or whatever. So you definitely made that work really well. Now I want to hear how you built up Clover's side.
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah. So again, started, just sort of putting it out there to friends and family before I really started marketing myself, fully, just because you want to have those test weddings too. I had done this for 4 years prior. I had been in that lead planner role. But still, you're doing it on your own. You don't want to oversell yourself. I think that's the other big piece of advice when you start any business, and I'm sure you guys get this as well, is that you can have a ton of experience, but I think it's really important to not come out there and say, oh, I'm a wedding planner. I can do full service planning. I can do all these things, when really maybe you don't have the skill set yet to do that. So I'm also a really big fan of knowing what you're capable of and not overselling yourself just to, unfortunately, there's a lot of things like a wedding planner. I can't just go out there and say I'm a doctor because obviously I don't have that education, but anybody tomorrow could say they're a wedding planner and just say that that's what they do, and they can technically start doing it. But do they really have the skill set to do it and the experience? And if people are paying you money to do it, you better be able to back that up. So
quick side question.
Yeah.
So in videography or video production, someone's like, oh, do you do video production? You're like, yep, talk to me, and then here's my work.
Yeah.
How do you show someone your work?
Yeah, great question. So it's definitely done through portfolios and like photos from weddings. So again, when I started, it's also a really big point here too for people that are transitioning from working to somebody else to starting their own thing that might be in the same industry. I was just talking to another wedding planner today about this. I had to leave that other company, and I knew that might happen at some point, but I tried to be really strategic about doing that the right way, and that's a big thing too. So if you're ever working with somebody and you want to start your own, thing that's similar to the thing you've been working with them on, you have to be really aware of, one, not taking any of their clients, two, not taking any work that was through them and calling it your own, and three, building that relationship and separating in the proper and appropriate way. And this is a really big thing people need to be aware of in this industry. And I tried really hard that when I left that other planner, who again, wish her well, all of those wonderful things, I didn't work with vendors she worked with for a really long time. I didn't ever make a connection. I didn't talk about me working with her. I didn't, I tried to keep it very separate and didn't obviously take any clients that I worked with her on and use any connections from that. I tried to build everything that I was doing differently and from a different area, different region, different network, all those types of things. So that's just another side comment too. But going back, what was the question? Where do we end up? Oh, how do we build it? Yeah. So I started with mostly friends' weddings first, just kind of saying, hey, who's getting married that I know? And also, I kind of did this pretty strategically. So I started the business when I was 25, 26. And it was kind of right at that prime time where I purposely wanted to start it, so by the time I was doing a lot of my own friends' weddings, I could have the knowledge and also start it at a time when people I knew were getting married, so I could strategically
25 is a great age.
Look
at that. Start kind of strategically saying,
masterminding.
Hey, now you're getting married, I could do your wedding. So, but a lot of it is jumping out there and saying, shout out to my sister Ainsley, who I know connected Dan and I on this, saying to my sister who is a couple years older than me, saying, hey, are any of your friends getting married? Hey, is anybody you know getting married? And putting that out to my Manyoung crowd too. So actually one of the very first weddings that I did was Kelly and Joe's wedding, and Kelly is actually now one of my full-time planners. So we made a great connection, and that's a whole other story I can tell you about too. But it was because a fellow business owner in Manyoung had recommended me. So I just started putting it out into the world, hey, I'm doing this. But I was also very frank with people when they hired me. And again, not pretending you're something you're not. I didn't go around saying, oh, I'm a wedding planner now and I have this amazing business. And I said, I have a lot of experience in the industry. I've been doing it for 4 or 5 years, but this is my business now. I just started. So So we're still a little bit newer, and keeping your pricing in a spot that's still competitive, but, being realistic about where you're at, and also realistic about what you can, promise people and expect from people. And luckily, people, friends and family especially, knew, a lot of the people that I worked with knew that I was newer in starting my own thing. But it's also, the other big thing that I'll push is that making sure, once you're putting yourself out there as a business, making sure you have the proper things in line, including, legal stuff, insurance, business, LLC, all that. There's, again, not to knock people starting their own business, or especially wedding planners. I really commend them trying to do this, but it's really important to do things the right way. So when I also started, I said immediately from the start, if I'm doing this, I'm doing it all the right ways. It's not a side hustle anymore. This is a business. So, opening that LLC from the beginning before I had any client even on the books, getting business insurance lined up, getting a lawyer involved to give me contracting advice and get all that drafted up. And so I did all of that before I even had a client. And I think, unfortunately, a lot of people start by getting clients and then say, oh man, shoot, I forgot I need insurance or all these things. And that's really what you have to set everything up the right way to start. So we did that from the start.
That's amazing advice. I think that a lot of people kind of try to put that by the wayside, or they see it as a side hustle, so they don't do certain things first. Another example, investing in a website, investing in a proper logo, things like that.
So I had somebody do branding for me. I had, did the website design, and luckily I had a lot of experience from that. So I did my own website and stuff like that. But yeah, nice. I think a big part of it is saying, okay, how am I going to make this official? And yeah, I tell people, even if you have a really small side hustle, like you do crafting from home and that you sell on Etsy, it should be a business. In order to really track things the right way and make it successful, any side hustle should be a business. It is a business. If you're making money on it, it's a business, and you 100%. Need to set it up that way. So again, big fan of doing that too.
Quick question for you. Yeah. So you mentioned how you got your first client.
Yeah.
How did you go about so you mentioned that you were just kind of networking within people that you knew to get your first clients. What are some other ways that were some of your first ways of finding clients? Was it the internet? Was it Craig? What did you do?
So, I think in the very beginning, again, people that I know, word of mouth, number one, still are a huge form of booking clients right now. So that was definitely the first one. Second was I definitely did a little bit of more modern cold calling, where I would see friends get engaged on Facebook, like friends from high school who I knew really well in high school, but obviously you go off to college, you kind of go on your way, whatever it is. I have my core group of friends, but people that I sort of knew as acquaintances and good friends from other times in life, I honestly would reach back out to and say, hey, just saw that you're engaged. No pressure. I always did the whole no pressure sale, but I'm now working in the wedding industry. If you need any help, advice, guidance, that would typically lead to a conversation and a call. So again, it doesn't really help when you're randomly just advertising or posting aimlessly about it, but doing those one-on-one connections with people and essentially cold calling people you know well to say, hey, I do this now. I'm getting more into this. Are you looking for any help in your wedding? And a lot of them were like, yeah, I actually need a lot of help. I have no idea what I'm doing. So that was a big thing, was taking that risk and kind of putting myself out there and saying, hey, I'm doing this now. Do you need help? And if they didn't need help or they weren't interested, there's no pressure. There's no hard feelings. It's just kind of putting yourself out there and saying, hey, world, I'm doing this now. Who needs my help with it? So that was a big piece of it too. And just, social media, connecting to Instagram. Kind of had just started around that time too, getting bigger. So, starting an account and connecting, that way with people. And then also, our biggest form still of business is through other vendors. So I started reaching out to like-minded vendors. So the same way I was talking about reaching out to companies you want to work for, reaching out to vendors that I knew I wanted to work with. So we still get, tons of people reaching out to us, in a good way, wanting to work with us. And there's people that I see, and all of them can be amazing vendors, but it was, what are the right vendors for my brand and the brand we're trying to build, and how can I connect with them and work directly with them? So the good thing is, right around that time in 2015 was when a lot of newer wedding planning vendors were coming out, and the wedding industry was changing in really big ways in Philadelphia. So I was kind of in that front line of connecting with some of the newer photographers, the newer florists who were very like-minded with me, similar age range. They were just sort of starting out but had great experience. And so all of us in a cool way have really grown together. So now we're all, 5 or so years into our business, and we've definitely kind of grown in that same trajectory. So I connected with a lot of them very early on to sort of kind of decide who were the vendors I wanted to be working with.
Love that. So I want to get into...
Dropping knowledge.
Yeah, this is so good.
Boom.
This is so good. How'd you come up with the name?
Sure, yeah. So my maiden name is Maloney. My new last name is a little bit more of a mouthful. It's Kuchemba, but Maloney, I'm obviously very Irish. And just not just because I'm Irish, but I've always had a thing for clovers. I think because it was such a part of me growing up and, traveled to Ireland and just being Irish in general, I just always loved clovers. I just always had a thing for them. And so I struggled a long time with what I should name it, but very early on too, I knew I didn't want to just call it Caitlyn Maloney Events or Caitlyn Events or something. One, I think I'm a little more creative of a person, and also I always knew it probably wouldn't just be me. I knew I wanted a team of people. I wanted to have more of a brand that spoke to a larger thing, not just me as a physical planner. So I wanted more of an event company. I wanted a company that could and a name that could reflect that. So I started thinking about things I loved. So I had a million names obviously, but I kept just coming back to I love clovers, and green happens to be my favorite color. And so I like logos that have icons. I did a lot of branding back in the day too. So I love logos that have an icon. Obviously I love your icon for that reason too. So great job with your branding.
It's not a cat.
Okay, you're just to be clear.
So many people think it's a cat.
So
that should be our
Jared?
tagline.
Yeah.
It should be tagline.
StrixMedia.
Yeah,
it's not a cat.
I love that. But yeah, I'm a big fan of having something. So if you just have Caitlyn Event Co, well, what is that? That doesn't mean anything to most people. And so I always, again, just loved clovers. I was doodling clovers in my notebooks all throughout high school, and that was just something that always people related to me personally. So, and then the sneaky thing that was sort of part of the name too, that was sort of on purpose, but not Clover. The middle spells love. So it's CLOVE.
Oh, wow.
So it's love.
Wow, okay.
So I was oh, that's kind of cute. So our first logo had the love kind of underlined as part of it. And so I just sort of kind of went with it, and it's sort of stuck ever since.
Cool.
So,
Cool.
yeah.
Now, did you have an idea for the name and the brand before you were completely separated from
Sure.
the other?
Yeah, I mean, I knew I always wanted to do my own thing. I had spent kind of some months before I knew I wanted to do this, thinking about it, planning it. Because again, I think you can't just decide to open a business. You have to really think about what it's going to be and what you want to do. So yeah, I'd probably spend a year or so taking it more seriously. Now I'm at the time in my life, I think I can do this, personally, financially, all those things. It takes a lot of money to open a business, as you guys might know too. To open it properly, I should say. You can open a business tomorrow, but to open it properly takes some money too. So yeah, I think I sort of had thought about it, planned it out, kind of thought about my approach, and then kind of ended planning weddings with them in December, and come January, February started kind of putting out to the world that I was doing this.
Cool. So what was the timeline from when you started kind of weaning off the other business to opening up and getting your first client and then booking that?
Sure. So it was probably I finished my weddings with the other planner in December and had my first wedding in May. So, but I'd worked with that client starting in say January, February time.
Cool.
Yeah. So,
awesome.
So yeah, and it just depends on how quickly you want that to happen, and sometimes it takes longer, which is fine. But it's all natural growth. So I think my first year in business, I did 8 or 9 weddings. I have all these facts somewhere in massive spreadsheets, but I did 8 or 9 weddings the first year. Then the second year, I think I did 16 weddings. Then the third year, I think I did 24. Then the fourth year, maybe 30 something. And then last year we did 53 weddings. So, you sort of slowly, boom.
Wow.
Yeah. You slowly build and build and build. And this year we've got 55, and we'll probably get up to 60. So you kind of slowly build. And again, word of mouth and all those things just kind of take it from there.
Sure.
So, yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about how you went about building your team?
Sure.
I was literally just going to ask that.
Yeah.
Look at that.
So who were you looking for first?
Yeah. Sure.
And how did you figure out what your weaknesses are, right? Or what
Great
you
question,
no longer wanted to work on
Super
to
important.
pass it on
Yep.
to someone
That's
else?
really, you guys, sounds like you guys have done this before and asking that kind of
We're only
questions.
60 episodes in.
Yeah, it's you're definitely pros here. So yeah, when I very first started, I knew I was probably going to be the only planner to start because I had that background. I didn't know anybody else that was interested in working with me that had that background. But first things first, I needed assistants to be with me on wedding days. So we sort of have our assistants who are amazing. Shout out to our Clover team who works with us on Saturdays. And most of them work full-time jobs during the week. And just, I don't know, they love weddings. They love doing this, and they help us on wedding days. So very quickly on, I needed assistants to show up to a wedding day with me. I couldn't just say, okay, here I am, ready to do your 200% wedding with just myself. I needed those assistants. So in the very beginning, I honestly started with friends. But I was also very aware of bringing in people and friends who had that right skill set. So a lot of my friends, because I'd been in marketing and PR, worked in marketing, advertising, PR. They had done brand launches and different events. So they kind of got the event world. You guys know you're in that business a little bit. I could honestly bring either one of you to a wedding day and you'd probably be fine. So, it's bringing somebody who has the right personality. You're like, I know, I'm serious though. It's bringing
We're
afraid.
We don't like women.
I know. You avoid them. But, it's finding the people who have the right skill set. So I had some other really wonderful friends who, when I started the business, would say things to me like, if you need me, let me know. I'm definitely available to help. And I would joke back with them and say, are you sure you want to work a 12-hour day on your feet and like load and unload cars and set up things and move, and just be, it's work, right? It's not.
Or it's like, I need you Friday. They're like, yeah.
Yeah, they're like, Saturday. I was like, I like to go out with my friends, the bar. Yeah, I'm like, right, this is work. This is a job. So even early on when I had my friends involved, I paid them. Like there was no free work. You're working. You're giving me your whole Saturday. You're working for 10 to 12 hours. You better believe I'm paying you. And set up a structure with my clients, obviously with what they're paying me to do it, to be able to afford to do that. So I think another big thing that I'm a huge fan of is there's no free work. You cannot pay people. You cannot not pay people. You have to pay them for the work they're doing. And for that reason, we've never really had like free interns. We've only had paid people helping us. And I think it's because I'm a really big fan of paying people for what they do, and also the work quality you get out of that is a lot better. So even my friends, I paid them to show up on wedding days, and I had a schedule with them, and I was like, this is a job, and if you don't like it, that's okay. Tell me, and we won't have you on again. But if a lot of them, luckily, were really good at it and really were supportive. So shout out to my original, friends and team members.
The OG crew,
who a lot of them, in a good way, have moved on to bigger and better things. Started growing families, taking on bigger jobs, so they can't give up their Saturdays. But they were so integral in those first couple years by giving me their time and really, their expertise in the event world too, to help out. But yeah, the next biggest step was after I had that kind of crew of assistants and I was the only lead planner. Obviously, I can only take on a certain amount of weddings a year, and I can physically only be so many places at once. I can only be one place at once, obviously. So the next step was, as I started getting more and more inquiries, and they were dates I was booked, I was essentially just losing the business because I couldn't be there, right? So the second step was getting people that we could now call lead planners and people to actually be able to take on their own weddings too. So Kelly, who I mentioned, which is our very first Clover client, it was funny because a year after her wedding, I randomly saw her in Manayunk, and I needed an assistant for like 2 weeks later because somebody had to cancel for the wedding, and I randomly just saw her and was like, right, I forgot how amazing she is and personable she is, and she's somebody who could definitely do this. So I literally asked her on the spot, hey, this is totally random, but do you have any interest in doing wedding planning? Because I had somebody cancel. I need an assistant in 2 weeks in Baltimore. She was from Maryland. So she was like, sure, because that's the kind of person she is. So She helped me assist at a wedding, and very quickly on got, the sense that she started assisting more and more that she could definitely do this and really take this on. And so very quickly we started having the conversation of, hey, she had a full-time job. Do you have time? And at the time her job was, I'm done at 5 and I don't do anything after work, and I don't need to do anything after work, and I don't do anything on the weekends. And so she was very, quickly able to say, after couple months to a year of assisting with me, starting to lead those weddings, obviously with a lot of training, which we can talk about that in a whole nother conversation. And then my other lead planner, Jessie, who's amazing too, she was also actually had booked Clover for her wedding. And when she booked, we found out we were neighbors. We literally lived like 5 houses away from each other. Which
That's crazy.
Because at the time we didn't have an office. And so the story goes that like we emailed, she's like, I live in Manayunk too. I'm like, me too, great. And I was like, I don't have an office yet. It was like my first or second year in business. I meet a lot at my house. If you want to come to my house, here's my address. And she literally is like, I literally live 30 seconds around the corner.
That's so weird.
I just moved, but we lived for 5 years right around the corner from each other, which was super fun. And so we met. She had hired us to do her wedding. We started working together and very quickly started forming, obviously, a friendship. And we had a lot of interconnecting friend groups and things like that. And so same thing. We started talking. She's like, I really like what you guys are doing. This seems so interesting. And she actually worked at the time for Live Nation. So she was sort of in the event world a little bit too. Yeah. And so I said, do you want to start assisting? And so everybody starts with assisting and just showing up on the wedding day. And they get—
It's a really good idea.
Yeah.
Because like assisting, you get like— It's like shadowing almost.
It's like shadowing, yeah. And they get paid. They get a lot of they get a lot of advice and guidance before they don't just show up on the day of. But when they get there, they're not planners. They're coordinators, and they can help and be a great set of hands. But there's always that lead planner to do it. So she started working with me very quickly as well. And yeah, here's where we can talk about struggles or like whoopsie moments that everybody gets into, right? Because I'll tell you how they finally became real planners, and it was partially my fault. Yeah.
So hold on, I have a question before that, and we're gonna get into that. So every entrepreneur or business owner, everything, has a point in their life when they're like, I'm going to start this thing, right?
Yeah.
And after that point, there's a time frame, in my opinion, that you're like, is this going to work?
Right.
Is this not going to work? where is this going to go, right?
Yeah.
What was that point or thing that happened to you, whether it was like a client or whatever that may be, that you're like, all right, like,
I got this.
There's
Yeah.
no going back. Like, we are only on our way up.
Yeah, great question. So I think before I started the business, it was like I said, probably about a year or so that I convinced myself, I think I could do this. I think I could do this. I started talking to people about it. I'm also a big fan of just putting things out into the universe. So I started telling my friends, I think I'm going to start a wedding planning business. What if I started it? Would you think people would hire me? What do you think people would think about it? What do you think about this name? So that was a big part of it. Once I started the business, when was kind of that moment, like you said, where I thought, okay, this could work. And definitely, as we just said, starting a business the right way takes money and takes a lot of expenses. So after I think my first year in business, where I met with my accountant at the end of the year and saw, I thought I'd made a lot of money. I was like, this is great. As a side hustle, like that was a pretty good revenue number, right? And then when you really broke it down and showed you what my net was for the year, which I'll be totally frank was like $5,000 or something, after making like pretty good revenue, I was literally like, are you kidding me? This is never going to happen. How do people make a full-time salary like this? $5,000? Like, luckily I had my full-time job at the time. Like, I'm never going to be able to do this, right? By the second year, I think my net, and I'll be frank, because I'm pretty open about numbers, but second year, I think it was like, again, I feel like I killed it. I doubled everything. And he's like, right, so your net was like 24,000. I'm like, okay, all right, we're talking a little bit better. But like, again, how am I ever going to do this full time? How is that going to pay the bills as my net revenue? And so by, I think, the third or so year, as he started coaching me, shout out to Engaged CPAs, Mike Clifford, for helping me kind of figure this out. Really, I had to look at the numbers. I had to be real about what I was charging and what quality of work people were getting and how much time I was putting into things and what that was actually looking like. And so and again, if I wanted to leave my other full-time job, how was I going to do that? But the other big part of this is you have to take the jump, right? So by the third year, it was this weird line where I was like, okay, so it's kind of like sink or swim. It's like jump or not jump, right? And so I couldn't guarantee in year 3 that I could make as high of a salary I was making at the time in my full-time job. But I knew the only way to get it was to leave that full-time job to dedicate all my time to it. So I was like,
yeah, because you run out of time, or you're going to start decreasing your value.
Yes. So I was like, well, okay, again, like if my net the year before was 24, if I could even get to 30, not that, people have different ideas of salaries, but I was like, that's enough to like live in Philly, right? I was like, I could make this work, but hopefully it's more, but I don't know what I'm really going to get, right? So it was sort of that moment where I had to say, I just have to do it. And I don't know till I do it, and there's really no way to know too. So I literally had to just jump and say, okay, leaving that behind, jumping, taking the risk, and obviously it paid off. So I think that end of that third year when I had the meeting with my accountant and then saw my numbers, and like partway through he had kind of been telling me, I think you're going to do this. And I was like, no, I'm not. There's no way I'm going to reach those numbers. There's no way I'm going to. Like, that's crazy. I don't know where you're getting this from. And he's like, I think you're going to. I think you're going to. But you still don't believe it because as you build up your year, you don't really know where you're going to end. And I think at that third year meeting with him at the end, when I saw the real numbers of what me dedicating myself full time to it was I was able to say, I think this could actually work. Like, I can do this, and I can like start having my life back, and I can do this.
Now, was it you adjusting pricing or adjusting how many you were doing per year?
A little bit of both, yeah. So again, adjusting pricing because I had now been starting in the industry a little bit more, getting higher end clients, and also the quality of work we were putting out. I was able to show that a little bit more, which was obviously again the point when you start, you don't have a lot to show. And so I was able to show higher end work that was able to get us to the pricing that we were valued at, but also just finessing our systems is a big part of it too. So I'm a big believer in working, on your business, not just in your business. So working on the processes to make yourself be more efficient and to really set that up too. And also I think, just saying, okay, well, me leaving my full-time job means I can take more weddings on and I have to be a little crazy. So I think in that first year when I was full-time, I led like 30 some weddings, which is a lot for a planner. Most people lead like 15 to 20 in a year. And it was because I had to work hard to make it pay off. And so I worked all the time. I still work all the time, but I worked all the time till like 2 a.m. most nights.
What did the first day after you quit your job look like? This is a good question.
I like this question.
We should ask this question to
like,
everyone.
what do I do with myself? You're like,
yeah,
totally
like what was it?
Yeah, so again, like I will say like at that point too, I had like, I had, again, planned out to end the year with that company. It was always like I ended the years. I never like just walked in and quit. And I think that's a big thing too. Certainly you have the right to do that. But again, if you want to have that relationship. So I had conversations that were, in September, I think by this December, I'll be good to totally stop. How does that feel to you? It was like an open conversation. So it was, again, I had been weaning off. And even at that point, I think by year 3, I was still consulting with them a little bit. But I think, yeah, it's one, setting up your own schedule and figuring out what's going to work for you and how you're going to work. And I had actually gotten an office by that point, which was really exciting. So I had a place to go to. That was another thing. I opened my Clover office like right down the street from my other job, so I could easily just go back and forth. So when they
look at
needed
you.
me, I was really 2 blocks away. So I would
Nice.
just go back and forth. That was another little trick.
That's like really
I was
lucky
like,
to
I'm
find
just
a
down
place.
the street if you need me. Like I can come back. So I would pop in for meetings if I needed to, go back and meet with the wedding client, pop in.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I was a little sneaky with that too. And yeah, so I think, that first day it was just, I already had I had done so much weaning. I'm also not good with change. Like people know this about me. It's like one of my really bad downfalls. So I can't do quick change. I could never quit anything in my life. I could never just pick up and do something. So when I started a business, it was, a slow start, meaning I had to really think about it and put it out there. When I moved recently, it was a conversation for a year, and I had to slowly do just everything in my life. I'm really not good with that. So I think it's also knowing yourself. I knew I had to wean. I knew I had to slowly make a transition, so nothing felt urgent. So it really wasn't, like you said, a big change of what I was like, great, another day. I just don't need to be there as much now that the new year happens.
Sure.
But it was also around the holidays where I was naturally taking time off anyway. So I had to do that process. But you have to know yourself.
Well, what's funny about that weaning process
Yeah.
is that you're technically event planning your life.
Yeah. Oh, totally. 100%. I'm that's welcome to my life. That's what I do. Yeah. It's you have to know yourself. Some people prefer that quick cutoff and that decisive. That's just not my personality. So you have to know that too.
So let's bring it back to what I cut you off on. Let's talk about the struggles, right? Because you had something specific that you.
Oh yeah. So how did Jessie and Kelly go from being amazing assistants to actually being planners?
Yeah.
Partially it was totally my fault, right? So, so I got married in 2017. Listen, we all make mistakes, which is why I'm gonna be very open about this. We're human. We all make mistakes, and as much as I'm a planner and I can be super organized, listen, we just make mistakes. So in 2017, I got married, and around August of that year, I had gotten an inquiry for somebody who was getting married the following May, and I was clearly in a busy time in my life, just personally. I was I was getting ready for my wedding and everything, and I had put in my calendar the date that I thought their wedding was, from our conversation, and I had put it in the wrong day.
Oh God.
So it was Memorial Day weekend, and there was multiple, obviously on Memorial Day weekend, it's not just a Saturday. You can get married on Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or Monday, right? There's many days. So I had put it in, I forget what it was, say their wedding was Saturday, I had put it in my calendar on Sunday. And I was like, great, I could do that wedding because the day before I was in my best friend's wedding also, and they were in the same area. So I was like, great, again, because I'm crazy and workaholic, I'm like, I'll be in my best friend's wedding the day before, and then I'll do this wedding the next day. Totally doable. That's just, I'll figure it out. I'll do it. Not a problem. So who does that? I don't know. Me, I guess. So I was like, I could do that. Not a problem. So I meet with this girl who I also know, and in our conversation, I'm talking about her wedding, and great, the day before, she knows I'm at my friend's wedding, and she was like, that's totally fine. I had another planner coming up to do her rehearsal, I figured it all out. And then as we're talking, she brings up to me, she's like, wait, but the wedding's on Saturday. I was like, in my head, I'm like, no, it's not. It's on Sunday. What? You're the crazy one here. You're the one that, and I mean, I didn't say that, but in my head, I'm like, what? And I realized, no, her wedding is on my friend's wedding day. So I can't be there. I'm going to be a bridesmaid in a dress at another wedding. I can't be there. So that's when so I'm like, okay, again, figure it out. Cause I'm a figure it outer kind of person. And it was just totally my fault. I looked back at her inquiry. I have no idea what happened. I actually blame it on Google because I don't know if you guys ever know this. If you use Google Calendar, sometimes when you add something on a date, it randomly moves it to a different day. If you click that day on the calendar first and add it, I don't know.
Oh,
I have been in that position where I add a meeting. And I'm like, oh, that why did that put that on Wednesday? I just pressed Thursday to put it on. So something happened like that where I just systematically put it in wrong and it just got stuck wrong. So,
Google Calendar should have a lock feature.
Yes. No.
So you have to
100%.
click
Unlocked before you
click,
can move.
click,
Yes.
and
so now,
click again.
Now I'm crazy when I add something to my calendar. I look, I'm like, okay, I'm adding it for Tuesday this time, and I have to look at it and be like, it added on Tuesday because now I'm very obsessed with that. So anyway, it got to the point where I was like, okay, so I can't be there, right? I can't be there. And so that's when I called Jessie and was like, so are you interested in leading weddings? Because I kind of need you to lead one. I just need you to do this if you're up for it. And she had only been assisting a little bit, but I knew she was fully capable. Both of them had the skill set. It was just they almost needed to be pushed to take the risk, right? They needed to be thrown into can you, it's again, sink or swim. Can you do this, right? Can you just do this? And obviously she was really nervous, but I was like, I'm going to be in the town. But again, Also, you can't call me because I'm in a wedding dress or I'm in a bridesmaid dress.
Were you gonna just like, I'm gonna go to the bathroom for a second?
Exactly. Like, run to the wedding. Yeah. So I was like, but I know you've got this. I'll give you the team. I'll give you all the things you need. And what happened? She killed it, right? So that was her first wedding, killed it. The second thing with Kelly that happened with her first lead wedding was earlier that year, before my wedding, I got an inquiry from a girl I went to college with, and she's super sweet. And I was like, I really want to help her, but it's her wedding was on my wedding day, so obviously, again, can't be there. But she really wanted to work with us, and one of our other team members was going to be at the wedding as a guest, and I was like, I feel like there's a way we could like make this work. It was also like a travel wedding, because again, I'm gonna say yes, or I'm like, we could figure this out. So same thing, I approached Kelly at that time. This was her first like lead opportunity, and I was like, hey, any interest in doing this? But again, by the way, it's my wedding, so you can't call me either, because like I'm actually going to be walking down the aisle. So like you're on your own once I set you up, and it's like, again, so both of them had experiences where they were completely on their own. They had assisted me super closely, trained under me for a long time, all those things. But there's sort of that moment where they have to just jump in and do it, right? There's just that moment where they have to. But it was just sort of funny that their two first weddings were weddings where I was also like completely unavailable to be helpful to them in any sort of way. Whereas like any other wedding, I'd be like, yeah, give me a call on a Saturday if you need me. I don't have a wedding, but you can call me. But they were just completely on their own. And it's obviously because I trusted them 100% and knew they could do it. But they almost needed that push to say like, I can't do it. You can do it, and you really can't bother me.
And you have to do it.
And you have to.
And you kind of have to. And again, that's what started off. So they, from there, took it from there and obviously succeeded amazingly.
So
then.
I have two questions
Yeah.
from that. How did you plan your own wedding?
Yeah, great question. I mean, I planned it obviously myself, but shout out to, again, my Clover team, who's amazing. So I had team members there basically facilitating it and doing all the day of, because that's the biggest thing is a lot of wedding planners don't think about having a wedding planner for their own wedding day. So I planned it, but I had my coordinators there executing it. So they were amazing on the day of. But there's definitely a photo of me like looking at the timeline at one point, and there's like a really funny photo that my photographer Sarah captured where I'm like looking down at the timeline, like asking about something, or there's like I'm sitting in the hair.
Kind of working.
I'm like, but I really try not to, and I think a lot of my my team that was there would agree that I was pretty good about like letting go, because all my friends and family were like, we think you're going to be like so stressed out on the wedding day. And I really wasn't, I think, because I knew the process so well in a weird way. It's like when you know the process so intimately and you know what's going to happen, I really was like so relaxed and not nervous because I knew they had it.
So,
wait, hold on. I had one more question. How did you handle, because you said you got married, so you obviously had a whole relationship, a whole personal life.
Yeah.
How did you go about balancing a personal life with this side hustle, with this other event planning job? Like I feel like that's a really hard thing to do.
It's super hard. Yeah.
And relationships can get lost over it. So I'm just curious how you went about going through that.
Absolutely, yeah. So I have an amazingly supportive husband, Adam, who was sort of with me when I started Clover as well. And I kind of said to him, hey, I'm going to do this, and it's going to take a lot of late nights, and it's going to take a lot of work. But we're both I think you're also two different kind of people, right? Like we are not play it safe people. We're like high risk, high reward kind of people. So I kind of said to him, this is what I want to do, and this is what I'm going to be doing. And he was like totally on board for it, and he knew what it would take. And luckily at the same time, like shortly after I started Clover, he had a career transition too, so he kind of took high risk, high reward situation too. And yeah, I mean, listen, even now it's still a struggle to make time for each other. And we did a personal move recently. We actually moved from Philadelphia up to the Poconos, which is crazy, but we're both from the Wilkes area. So we kind of gave up our tiny man and grow home and moved to a house in the mountains. And that was partially because we needed that lifestyle change for ourselves, and we needed to get back to our roots of what was important to us as a couple and where we wanted to potentially raise a family and where we wanted to be. And that was a big part of that decision too. So now that the business is 5 years old, I am able to make more choices that are best for Adam, myself, and our family.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So, all right. So there's a couple ways this question could go.
Oh, here we go.
So I feel like you probably have a lot of stories, right? Because like what you do is very, eventful.
Yes.
No pun intended. So what's one of the most memorable moments that was like, I guess you could tell us too, right? Because I think that you'll have good answers for this.
Okay. What are you going to ask? Good.
One of your most memorable moments of like you impacting someone through your job, right? Whether it was an employee or someone that was your client. And then what's a really funny, ridiculous story you've heard or been at a wedding for?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with some funny ones. And I will, of course, not name names, and all of our clients we love so much. But yeah, I had, like a lot of times it's funny because when you first meet the client, like we get really close to them throughout the process. But when it's very intimate, right? So we go into their home, we're with them when they're getting like dressed a lot of the time, and we have a lot of clients who get to know us very quickly and are really comfortable with us, and others who are more reserved personalities where, us being in the room with them when they put their dress on is not comfortable, which is totally fine. So we basically take their lead. Like I've literally like held my bride's breasts before and like taped them up and all of those crazy things. And I have other brides who are like, I want to get dressed privately over here, which is totally fine. We're there to help, but also like this is their day. We never want to make people feel uncomfortable. We're there to do it. So I just had one bride who was like really shy about all of that, which is again totally fine. I'm like, outside the door, here's your dress, here's your jewelry. Like you let me know when you're ready. And then it was sort of just as the night went on and she got like drunker and drunker and like she was having a lot of fun. By the end of the night, we had to do a dress change with her, and it was like all like shyness of anything was gone. So I like bring her to this room. I'm like, I put your dress over here. I'll shut the door. It's like ready for you when you want, but like it's in this room. Take your time. I'll be out in the hall if you need me. And literally she's like, I need your help. And she starts just ripping off all of her clothes, and she's like completely naked at this point because she had like not worn a lot of undergarments. And she just, all inhibition was just like gone at that point in the night. And it was just,
love alcohol.
Again, like I'm here to help, but it was just so funny in my head. I'm like, wow, there's been a change since this morning. And like, again, and she's like, I need your help. Like hold this, do this, do this. And I'm like, okay. And so, yeah, I think, the funniest parts is that like we get to know our clients at that level a lot of the time, and they need to be able to trust us in those situations. But it's it's laughable at the end, but it was sort of a funny moment of like, boy, this is a big change from earlier in the day. So it was a funny one.
I love that. I love that.
And then the first question was more just about
like anything that like sticks out to you that a client saying
sure.
something to you, or you went above and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, listen, I think in general with really exciting life events like weddings also comes the reality of life, right? So unfortunately, we've had a lot of deaths the week of a wedding. We've had, grandparents pass 2 days before the wedding. We had a father who had a heart attack the day before the wedding. So we've had a lot of these moments the reality is like that's life, right? And things need to happen. And so, I think when we can be there for clients in those moments too, and saying, our one client who had, the father of the groom had a heart attack the day before, it was, okay, what can we do? We went into action. We hired a videographer last minute to come the day of the wedding to shoot it because he couldn't leave the hospital. We had an iPad ready to FaceTime him into the ceremony so he could be there. And it was convincing like the mother that she should be at the wedding and that's like what the father would want the mom to, because she wanted to stay with her husband, obviously. But we knew it was important for the couple to also have the mom there. So it was sort of jumping in and like connecting with the vendors, telling everybody what happened. And everybody in that moment just went above and beyond. Like the videographer came out to do the wedding. The photographer stayed extra hours. The vendors were doing all these things. And I think that's really the amazing thing about the wedding industry is it is super emotional. It's super raw. And you're getting people in these moments of being kind of at their most vulnerable. And we're all there to just make it better. And that's why, one of my favorite things is just being so close to our clients. Like they are like family. We get to know them really well. And at the end of the day, when they're in tears saying like, you guys are the best, you're amazing, we couldn't have done this without you, I think that's obviously the biggest reward for us. So it's really emotional. It's an emotional process.
That's super cool.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Love that.
All right. So let's talk a little bit about first side question. I always have side questions.
Uh-oh.
Do you plan any other type of events?
Yeah, so I've done galas in the past. I've done festivals, like I mentioned in the past, but primarily with Clover now, we just focus on weddings. I think weddings are super specific and they're very niche, and there's different vendors. We can work with amazing videographers and photographers that are amazing at what they do, but not for weddings. So we've now kind of have this repertoire of photographers and florists and venues and vendors that we work with that really focus in weddings. So most people in the wedding world really just try to hyper-focus on that.
Cool.
That makes sense.
So let's talk about advertising.
Yeah.
So we talked about how you got your first clients and what
Yeah.
was really strong. Do you do any type of advertising currently or any type of marketing that you see
Results from?
Yeah. And I know that you've also started a podcast, so feel free to plug that.
Just started, so we'll tell you about that. Luckily a lot of our business comes from word of mouth. So amazing clients that refer us to their friends. I always say like being on site at a wedding day is our best advertisement because we're with the wedding party and half of them are engaged too. So we're always there being like, hey guys, and they'll start asking us questions. What do you do? I'm getting married in 2 months. And that's really a big piece of it. And then also from our other vendor friends give us a ton of business. So we have a lot of vendors who we share weddings back and forth with them, and that's really helpful too. So that's obviously I would say the key side of our business. But yeah, there's definitely for us, it's really getting out there and being engaged. So, like, we're really big fans of Philadelphia Wedding Magazine and the editorial team there. So we definitely do some small ads with them just to keep that support and attend a lot of their opening events. We're attending, like, their Brides and Bubbly event this Sunday. So we definitely attend some of those showcases that work really well. And we also try to get out there with education. We just did the Bridal Masterclass by House of Catherine last week, and that was really a way for us to actually educate other wedding planners, and that kind of gave us some good
I was going to ask you,
yeah,
what is that?
Yeah, so it's basically like a wedding pro event, and we were there on site educating other vendors on how to set up styled shoots. So we were like one of the educators for that. So getting out to those things is great. We're also doing like the Knot and Wedding Wires Wedding Pro Workshop coming up this April in Philadelphia, which we're super excited about. So trying to get our name out there that way with sort of these bigger events is typically the way we advertise. We don't do a lot of like print paid advertising, except for Philly Wedding because we love them. But yeah, I would say, and a lot of it's social media, obviously. So just posting and sharing our story. We like to be pretty fun on social media. So our feeds a lot of our weddings, obviously, and our more formal photos from photographers, but we do a lot of Instagram stories after weddings where people can kind of just get the feel of how we saw the day unfold and get some of those behind the scenes of our team being funny and having a good time behind the scenes. So we like to show that side of ourselves as well. But yeah, that's the biggest
That's
part
fun.
of it. Yeah.
So you're more of a guerrilla tactic. You know, get out there, get your hands dirty.
Yeah. Feet wet,
whatever.
hands dirty. Yeah, either one. Yeah.
Feet wet, hands dirty.
Hands dirty.
Do something.
Do something. Yeah. And I think that's how we view it, is like getting out there, being a part of things is really, you know, what we found to be the most successful way instead of doing just like regular print advertising.
Sure. Awesome.
What's like the first thing someone should do when they're getting ready to plan a wedding?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, I mean, I think people get really overwhelmed, obviously, with the process. And I think when clients come to us, sort of, we got engaged 2 weeks ago, what do? We try to have, you know, before they just pick a venue and pick vendors and pick all these things and start asking friends who they worked with, we try to have an honest conversation with them about what they want that day to look like. There's lots of different weddings, and we do all different kinds of them. We do, you know, 250-person weddings at the Union League or the Barnes Foundation, and then we also do, you know, 30-person weddings at Mulheron's in Fishtown, like our small restaurant. So we kind of do a lot of the gamut of the types of weddings that you can do. And so before you even think about, oh, I want all these people to be there, or I want this, well, what does that look like? What is that day going to feel like? What do you want that day to feel like? Where do you want to be for that day? You know, myself, we got married up in the Finger Lakes, and it was because we didn't want to have that city wedding feel. We wanted a weekend away with our guests, and that's a place that's important to Adam and I. So before you even jump into like venues and all those things, taking a step back and really saying, what do we want this day to look like? And also, how much do we want to invest in it?
Yeah.
So as you guys might assume, weddings are expensive, and quite frankly, they're getting more expensive. And I think it's because how much pressure people are putting on the industry and things people see on Pinterest and on Instagram, and the amazing work that, you know, people in the Philly and New York and New Jersey wedding industry do are amazing. But they're not cheap, and they're a lot of money, and it's because we all put so much time on the back end to make that possible. You're shaking your head. Yeah.
Now, what's the most expensive wedding that you've planned?
Yeah, so again, Philly is not as crazy as New York or even like the North Jersey market, to be completely honest. Philly is definitely it's an attainable price point city where you can have a wedding that's not as absurd as New York and California, but like a really high priced wedding in Philly that we've done is more in like that $250 range. So,
wow.
But in Philly, you can definitely do a wedding at 46. You can do a $20,000 wedding, but it needs to be like 50 people at a restaurant. It can't be 200 people. But I would say our average clients right now typically are in that like 60 to 150 range.
Wow. It's like literally a house.
Yeah.
When do people start looking for an event planner, or when should they? Is there a disconnect? Like, you want me to plan your wedding in a week? Like, is that ever happened? Like, is that weird?
Great
like,
question.
how
I planned a wedding very quickly before.
And side note, is there something that when you do speak to someone that a wedding planner might not be right for them?
Yeah, absolutely. So
I've got so many questions
here. Okay, so I guess first things first. Yeah, I mean, I've planned a wedding in 3 weeks. I've planned a wedding in 3 months, and I've planned a wedding in like 2 years. So the really short ones that we've planned for a while, we were doing this fun thing in Philly called surprise weddings, and we were kind of the planner that kept doing them all, which is really fun. Where we would tell people they're invited to an engagement party, and it was really a wedding. So everybody would show up thinking it was an engagement party, and we surprised them with the wedding. So that was a shout out to Chloe and Jimmy, our first surprise wedding couple. Yeah, we worked with them.
Wait, say that again, because I looked down at the computer and I was reading.
Dan, focus.
Sorry.
Focus.
What did you say?
So we started this thing in Philly called surprise weddings, and it was our first clients, Chloe and Jimmy, who were so fun. They had an engagement party planned at La Colombe in Fishtown, and they literally just called me one day, the mom and the bride, and they were like, the thing is, like, we have this engagement party in 3 weeks, and to even think about planning a wedding for a year is feeling exhausting, and what if we just turn the engagement party into the wedding? So, and the mom was also, shout out to Nina, who was like, by the way, I'm also leaving tomorrow for South Africa for like 3 weeks. So I'll be back the week of the engagement party. And you guys need to plan a wedding while I'm gone. So in 3 weeks, we found like florist, we got her a dress, we got a cake, we did like all the things, we made it into a wedding. So basically guests showed up to the engagement party and there was a sign at the front that was like, you thought this was our engagement party, but ... And they kept walking and said, we're actually about to get married. And there was like a whole ceremony set up. So
what?
I just got chills.
I know.
That
it's
was cool.
like so much fun. So this is where like we really like to work with clients to also make it their experience, because that couple felt daunted by planning a wedding for a year. And if that's not exciting to you, then why would you do it, right?
Yeah.
They were like, that just doesn't seem like something we want to do. And honestly, it was the most incredible experience that we've planned 2 or 3 other surprise weddings since then with couples who, again, same thing, just wanted to have that experience. So we had another wedding with Lisa and Ed where she was from Greece and they were going to maybe bring everybody to Greece and do this whole thing, but again, kind of felt a little daunting and they weren't sure what they wanted to do. And so we invited everybody to this engagement party, but said it was like a little bit more formal. And that was really fun because we actually had them at people walked in, it was a full engagement party. Lisa was in a black dress, he was in a suit. It was like engagement party, nothing expected. Food happening, little music. It was definitely like a swanky, engagement party, but it was just an engagement party and the couple was there mingling, all the things. But the cool thing about the venue is there was these doors that shut and most people had never been there. So nobody knew there was anything beyond the doors, right? So it just looked like you were in this small room. And so we had the engagement party going, and basically we snuck the couple upstairs without anybody realizing, and we had a video done by one of our videographer friends that we were like, oh, and now as part of the engagement party, we're going to play this video that's been telling like how Lisa and Ed have been doing their planning and all that kind of stuff. And people are watching this video while they're upstairs changing into a gown and a tuxedo, and nobody knows this is happening. And we're, again, like the coordination behind this is like ridiculous. But the time, and you don't know if it's going to work out, right? So I'm there shaking, like, is this going to work out?
Do you have a headset?
Well, so it's a good question. We'll talk about. Yeah, but we're like, trying to be non-obvious. So I'm like, okay, I'm like upstairs with them. Somebody else is downstairs, like keeping an eye on what's going on. It was a whole thing. And then basically in the video, they basically start talking about the wedding process, and it goes on and on and on. And then partway through the video, they basically just say like, this is too much. Like, let's just get married. Let's just get married now. Let's get married right here. And then they literally say, turn around. And we had lights turn on, and they came down the staircase in a gown and a tux, and we had a wedding on the staircase.
Wow.
So people were freaking out. And then the other fun part of that was we basically, right after that, the second the ceremony was over, we opened these doors, and there was like a 10-piece band, an entire reception room, and nobody had any idea it was behind there the whole time. So we had to do like the sound check earlier.
Surprise.
It was like all these things to make sure, like the band was in this room keeping quiet for like an hour before we opened the doors. And we're like, okay, guys, you have to do your sound check, and then literally be silent for like an hour and a half before we open these doors, because nobody can know you're back here. So they're
Very
really
cool.
fun.
That's wild.
Yeah, really fun.
Holy shit.
So we're super into surprise weddings, so people like the thrill of that.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I had a question.
Yeah.
When you got married, did it change or give you any new perspective
Definitely.
on event planning for weddings, like you being now in it and going through the process?
Real quick. If everyone's watching on Facebook Live, YouTube Live,
What up?
Twitch, I see that we have 11, 13 people.
We're doing pretty
Comment #live, comment a question. If you don't comment #live, I'm blocking you from the stream.
Blocking it.
All right. No, I love you guys.
Blocked.
Yeah, so
Not
I
blocked.
think doing the planning process myself definitely put things a little bit more into perspective with me too. And I think just understanding the emotional side of planning, right? Planning a wedding is not that hard. Like I could honestly plan somebody's wedding in a week or two if I could just have free reign and say, great, I'll make all the decisions for you. I'll call the vendors. I'll make it all work. It's the emotion that adds to it. It's the family dynamic that adds to it. It's you balancing what your family wants, what your partner's family wants, what you both want, all those things. That really, like, it's not a bad thing, but it adds to the time and the emotion involved in planning the wedding. And so I think for me, it was also understanding that a little bit and saying like, oh, now I know why my brides have such a hard time, like, picking the chair selection I'm narrowing it down to for them. Like, why to me, I'm like, this is the chair you should go with. And to them, they're like, well, what's going to be the chair for our wedding day? And is everybody going to like it? And what's going to be happening? Is that the right thing? So every little decision has a little bit more emotion involved. And now I think I understand that a little bit better. Like picking your dress is a big decision. And once you pick one thing, for me as a planner, I get to do this all the time. So if a client picks something, I'm like, great, you get to pick that. This other client's picking this. I get to see all the options all the time. For them, it's the one thing they're picking. So they feel like it's very definite. And that's why I also try to tell people not to feel that way. That you're, one other thing I think that I tell my clients a lot is that you'll hear a lot of people say, well, I want a timeless wedding, or I want a wedding that, that feels classic and timeless. And the reality is no wedding feels timeless. Like I can show you a wedding from the 80s and I know it's a wedding from the 80s. I can show you a wedding from the early 2000s and I know it's a wedding from, I can tell. And it's mostly by the attire and certain things.
Why is that? something that people desire?
I think they worry, like, what if in the next year I don't like it? And so what I try to, what if in 5 years now I don't like what I picked? And they get really nervous about that decision. And so what I try to tell them is, do what you love right now, and you're going to look back and kind of laugh. Like, my husband and I had, a campground wedding at this, like, glamp ground, and I wore a very, like, long sleeve, very, like, 70s vibe dress. And I'll probably look back and laugh at decisions we made, but I'll know that it's what we wanted in that moment. It's what I loved at that time. And I think a lot of couples get stuck on, like, well, what if in 5-10 years I don't like those decisions? But I try to tell them, like, why should that matter?
Yeah.
Do what you love now, and do the, if you love bold color right now and that's your thing, like, have a bright wedding. Don't play it safe, like, go bold. So luckily, I think we've branded ourselves in a way that, again, everybody's style is different, and everything, whatever they want to do is okay with them. But we brand ourselves a way that we typically work with clients that want to take a little bit more risk. We don't do a lot of ballroom and country club weddings for that reason. We typically do weddings at more unique venues, more unique spaces. We do weddings where they want a little bit more of, like, I hate to use the word theme because people immediately think of, like, prom and, like, like the Under the Sea theme. But, we've all been there. But they have, like, a feel to them and an emotion, authenticity, and a story behind them. And it's not just, oh, we played it safe with black and white this and neutral this and bows on that and, like, kept it safe. They're typically taking a little bit more of a risk and have a little bit more of a design edge that creates that authenticity that people show up and they're like, this feels like a wedding that's happening now that's relevant to this couple right now in their life, and we feel that. And so we get a lot of great comments from people saying, like, this wedding felt so authentically this couple. It wasn't just anybody's wedding, and that's why we try to do that.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So 2 questions. What's the coolest venue that you've gotten to, like, most unique? And then have you ever had a guy plan a wedding?
Oh, yeah, the grooms. Yeah, we definitely have a lot of involved grooms, which is great. Again, it's really what works for them. So sometimes the groom is more of the planner personality than the bride, and we have a lot of same-sex couples too, which we work with obviously too. So there's typically one partner that tends to take the lead, and there's also some partners where they're both very, very involved. So it's totally up to them. But yeah, we definitely have a lot of grooms, and we typically know from the start if they're going to be involved because they're the one that does the initial inquiry. So when I get an inquiry from a groom, I'm like, all right, they're going to really be hands-on, because if they're even reaching out to us from the start, I know they're going to take the lead.
Cool.
Which is fine. And we have some couples where the mom is more the lead in the planning, and that's fine too. So it's really knowing their dynamic and what will obviously, work for them too. Venues, we've worked at a lot of amazing venues in Philly. We definitely have a lot of favorites. And again, it's really about kind of that style and feel that we feel like best sort of represents us. So, the big venues we're at, like, the Horticulture Center a lot, the Kimmel Center, I said, like, the Barnes, a lot of those big Philly ones that people know. But we really like those intimate weddings. Like I said, we've planned weddings at La Colombe in Fishtown, the coffee shop, Mulheron's, which is a little restaurant.
Wow.
It's like really fun places like that aren't traditional wedding venues. Distilleries, breweries. We're at La Peg a lot, which is an amazing, like, restaurant and theater that's right under the Ben Franklin Bridge. So we've got a lot of favorites like that are really unique spaces. And we're there to, again, guide clients into figuring out what's the best space for them.
Awesome.
Have you ever planned a wedding that was literally completely opposite of, like, a typical wedding where, like, instead of the reception, they just threw, like, a massive party or something totally different?
Yeah. So we've had clients too where, like, one of our couples, had a courthouse wedding in November, and then the following May, they just wanted to have a really big barbecue with their friends. So they didn't want to have the ceremony and all the things and all the formalities. So they went to the courthouse, had a photographer for that, and then 6 months later, we planned this really big barbecue at the Moss Building in Fishtown. And it was a really fun way to have it be a lot more casual. So we also get a lot of clients who don't want that traditional element. They want to have it be a little bit, more unique too.
Were people dressed up?
Yeah, people were dressed up, but it was just, a lot more casual. There wasn't all those formalities that go into a wedding day. They were showing up, the bride's there.
That seems stressful in a way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and the bride, Nikki had, like, an amazing floral necklace on, and there was all these, like, fun things that made it feel a little bit more untraditional than a typical wedding day.
So we have some questions from Facebook Live.
So I wonder if people that I know or not know. Right?
All right, so we got
what up, Facebook? We're gonna answer we'll try to get to your questions.
Yeah.
All right. So we got a question from Michael, and he said, if you were going to cut a corner, where would you cut? And would it be centerpieces, invites, do something yourself?
Yeah. Okay. So this is a great budget question too. So we get a lot of questions, obviously, about budget. So I'm really a big fan. A lot of people come into the process, and this happens all the time with clients, and they have a set budget, and so they're like, great. Well, we want all the things we want to keep in this budget. We'll just slim everything down. Instead of getting the best photographer, we'll get, like, the third best level. We'll get okay flowers. We'll just cut that flower budget a little. We'll get a band, but we'll get a smaller band. We'll get a videographer, but, like, a newer one. And everything they're doing is just pared down, because yes, those vendors in that pared down price range are okay. And they might be a good way to do, but they're definitely not that like top level. And we're not talking like top level, but they're definitely not like out like the wow factor, right? And my point to that is, okay, great. If you do that, what happens? Nothing is a wow factor. Everything is like, okay. The flowers are okay. They're nice. The bands, they were decent. The foods, it was decent. The invites, they're all right, right? So everything's just all right.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
you have
When you put it that way.
right, yeah, but like I know, like I don't mean to say it and be judgmental, but it's sort of like everything's then okay. And so what we tell clients instead is we try to work with them on what are the 3 most important things, and we need to go big on budget with those. Not the highest end, but we need to splurge a little bit more on those to really give you the impact. And for a lot of our clients, photos are a big one. For certain clients, flowers are a big one, and certain ones they aren't, and other things are more the priority. So we figure out what are their 3 priorities, and we splurge on those, and then we save in other ways. So I would rather you splurge on flowers because you care about them, and like not have transportation entirely and let your guests just like Uber and park at the venue and just cut that piece out. Or I'd rather you, go big on decor, but like not have fancy invites because you aren't somebody who values like a really high-end invitation. So we can do a paperless post, or we can do like a simple again, some of my big weddings we've done just very simple like 2-piece invitations because that's not something they value. But we've like spent a lot more money on florals and decor. So that invite was sweet and simple, but when they got to the wedding, the florals and decor were like huge wow factor. But then the invite doesn't also need to be a wow factor. So it's figuring out kind of where you want to put that money. And I'm really a big fan of like, you can't have it all and you can't put money into it all. And when you take it all and pare it down, it's really like nothing exciting.
It's very lackluster.
So kind of cut things that are less noticeable, like
less noticeable to you,
the
but it's also
transportation.
to you, right?
Yeah.
Like to you, certain things might not be important. To certain brides, florals are really important, and they're spending a lot of money. I want to talk about like a lot of money on flowers. And to other clients, they're like, that doesn't feel good to me. That feels like a waste because flowers aren't their thing. So great, okay, no problem. We can keep that smaller, but what I need is more money for like rentals and upgrades. So I had a client where like florals aren't important, but we spent a lot more money on me changing out the chairs at the venue, getting higher end tablecloths, doing upgraded goblets, upgraded flatware, because that gave them they still want it to feel elevated. Well, then I need money in another place to make it feel elevated, but it doesn't need to be in flowers.
Sure.
So it's kind of deciding where that money goes.
So we got another question from Deb, one of our good friends. Shout out to Deb from Jersey Club Sports.
What up, Deb? We love you.
She asks, what's your opinion on the mobile bar industry? Example, camper turned into a traveling bar.
Yeah, so we do a lot of those at weddings too, obviously, like, the traveling bars, Prosecco trucks, things like that. So the good thing is a lot of those vendors are amazing, but the biggest thing for people to know is certain venues allow them and certain ones don't. So before you book something, you have to check with your venue to ask them if they allow what's called outside vendors. But yeah, that's again one of those wow factor moments. So for all of our weddings, we typically like to talk to clients also about like, what is that one sort of wow factor thing going to be?
That one experience,
right? And I call it like auxiliary and experience vendors when I talk to clients. So when I talk through, okay, who's doing your photos, and we go through all those vendors, then I'm like, okay, now let's talk about the other things. And they're like, what other things? I'm like, what's the experiential element going to be?
The ice cream bar.
Yeah, like what is the thing that people are going to remember?
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
Oh,
so it's
I want a la mode bar.
Yeah, right. I love it.
So I'm getting excited.
Yeah.
I'm not getting married.
So it's, what is that experience that people are going to walk out of and remember and know? And so, having like that truck or cart that's alcohol based is really fun. There's live painters we do, there's illustrators we've had tarot card readers at weddings, we have poets at weddings, so things that people walk out of that wedding and they're like, I've never seen that before. Like you want to have that little bit of an element that people find exciting. We've had alpacas at weddings before.
Yes. I think I saw that on your Instagram.
Yeah. We also have a big wedding coming up at Alpaca Farm this year too. But really like those things that people will find exciting. And it also gets the couple excited about the day too. It's like that little thing that made their wedding feel a little bit different. And definitely, those bar carts and things are a big part of that. And also for those carts, that's really where you can get into the really custom stuff. Like a lot of the cocktail companies we work with, they're bringing that extra level. So we had a client recently who they're based in New York. They love high-end cocktails. Like that's their thing, right? So having that a higher end, they couldn't just have a bar that had like gin and tonics and rum and cokes. They had to have cocktails. And that's a very different thing. You're either a cocktail drinker or you're not a cocktail drinker. And for them,
I'm a cocktail drinker.
I'm a cocktail drinker too. So they wanted that. So we brought in, Spirit Forward to create these custom cocktails. And the groom actually owns a company called Seedable, which is like a sesame seed butter company. And so there was a whole cocktail made with sesame because that's his thing. So when people got there, it was like, of course there's this cocktail there. That's because they love cocktails. It's made with his sesame. It's like like a whole story. So again, we're trying to craft that story, and by having those auxiliary vendors, that's the way to do that.
I was just at a wedding the other day, and their like cocktail menu was pictures that were like illustrated of their pets,
yeah,
and then the drinks were like named after.
Yeah,
I was like,
that's cool.
That's cool.
We do it all. People are like, have you ever heard of this? I'm like, literally, it's a good idea. I'm like all the time. I've like the amount of dog faces I put on napkins and matches and bar menus and all the things. But again, that's what we talk to clients about too. What are important things you want to bring into your wedding? And oftentimes they're like, our dog, our pets. Like we need to have the cat present or the dog present. We even had like a drawing of one of our clients' pups. Done by one of our vendors, and it was like in a frame on their table. So at Lindsay and Pat's wedding, there was like a picture of their dog at their table. So it's like they wanted their dog there, and so that was the way we did it.
Have you ever? How many pets have walked the
then walked down the aisle? So
ring,
we had a really fun one at our client Becca and Jamie's wedding. She works for the Points guy in New York, if you're familiar.
Yep.
And they have the Points pups, and her dog is one of them. So he's like famous too. Like he's a known dog in the industry.
You know who she's talking about? The Points guy. He's basically, shout out to Kristofi. They just like fly around the world like Kristofi, like free on points, and he like teaches you how to do it.
Oh, exactly. So her dog is like, one of the owners has a dog too, and they're like all the Points pups. So this dog is like also kind of famous. So people know that like this dog is a thing. So her brother like walking down in a full tuxedo, like hilarious, and also was like the cutest dog ever. And then also like held him up at the end of the aisle, like total Simba style, flanking. And everybody in the crowd was just like cheering because everybody knew it was like this thing. But then of course, behind the scenes we're coordinating like the dog walker bringing him, putting him in the outfit. She's hiding behind the curtain to hand off. Like there's all the behind the scenes that people don't know is happening. So we had this whole handoff system ready. But yeah, you've got to have your dogs involved in the wedding if you can.
Quick logistical question.
Yeah.
In our industry, when we submit something, we wait on changes or like, hey, what do you guys like? What do you guys don't like? Like we kind of give them options or give them like, here's the thing.
Sure.
What are your changes, right?
Yeah.
In your industry, it's all about, all right, here are your options. What do you like?
Yeah.
How do you handle, is there ever a process where like they don't get back to you or like you're waiting on them to get back to you? How do you handle that? And how many options do you usually give them?
Yeah, great question. So our thought when it comes to planning too is that the reason they hire us is because we are the experts and we're trying to make their planning process easier. So we certainly, we say like clients out there who want every option, maybe we're not the best planner for them, because our approach to that process is if you're hiring us, like I could literally, you're not even planning your wedding, but I could sit with you guys for 5 minutes and probably pick your entire vendor team for you in like a matter of minutes. Because once we start talking to them and they tell me what their priorities are, what they think is reasonable to spend on each vendor with my guidance on what's typically spent on each vendor, I can literally take our Rolodex of like these 100 photographers we work with down to like 5 I think they'll like. And out of that 5, I can really narrow it down to 3 I think they'll really like. And I typically know which one they're actually going to pick and hire. So it sounds crazy, but we know the vendors so well and then we get to know the clients so well that like, and after they've looked at all of them, they often come back to me and I'll tell them what I think their first pick is, and they'll laugh and they'll be like, "Yeah, that was our favorite." And I'm like, "Yeah, I knew it would be." So the point of hiring us too is the goal is like we're gonna save you time. Like you can go on the Knot and Wedding Wire and look at every photographer or venue or DJ or florist in Philadelphia, and you could drive yourself crazy doing that. But the point of having us on board is I can quickly say to you, that's not the right one for you. So there's different styles of photography and different styles of florists. So I can literally just narrow it down. So I like to give our clients 3 options of most things. And most of the time I can, in a good way, kind of steer them in the direction that I think is going to be the best fit.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. Well, have you ever had any like, all right, here's the other side. There's also a psychological side or a, I guess relationship like mediation side to this whole thing, right?
Mediation's a big word.
Have you ever had to
tread this lightly, but yes, go ahead. Yes.
Have you ever had to like, mediate like I don't know, like an argument, like we're like just like obviously the groom and the bride might have totally conflicting ideas of what they want or what they see. How do you handle that? And like what's that look like?
Yeah, so there's again a lot of people involved in the wedding planning process. There's the couple and then there's also the parents, and if they're financially investing in the wedding too, that's a big part of it. So how do we balance what mom or dad or whoever might be financially contributing into that wedding and getting what they want, but also having it relevant to the couple and still feeling like it's their wedding. So we're really big fans of saying, like, even if parents are paying for it, even if they're involved, like, the couple is our priority first and making sure it's a wedding that they feel like is authentically them. But yeah, I mean, we literally say, like, half of our job is mediation. And it's mediation between the couple and their family, the couple themselves, and also the couple and their other vendors. So we often have to work really carefully on, you know, balancing that. Even when there's like when our clients have an issue with one of their vendors, we're often brought in to balance that and negotiate that and also like mend that relationship. And sometimes it's just miscommunication, and in a good way, like that's why they hire us. So if they have an issue with even their vendor, they don't have to go to them head on and try to figure it out. They can come to us and have us behind the scenes talk to that vendor offline and try to like figure out that there was just miscommunication here. Let's get us all back on the same page. Let's figure out what's really going on. And that's like partially why they hire us to do that. And partially is because they might have a mom who really wants to be involved and they don't want the mother to be involved. Or they have a mother-in-law who wants larger say. And so we can be that mediator where we kind of joke that we don't have to deal with them after the event. So they blame a lot of stuff on us, which is like totally okay if they need to. But that's also why we're there to say like, oh, I know you want to do that speech, but there's just like not quite enough time in the timeline. And it's because we know the couple doesn't want them to speak or there's something else happening behind the scenes. So
Got it.
I don't want to say too much, but that, you know, we walk that line a little bit too, and we have private conversations with them, you know, in that process to make sure we're balancing that.
Sure. So they tell you a budget up front, and you try to work within that budget, right?
Yeah. So that's challenging too. So, you know, quite frankly, budgets are ever changing, and so, you know, a lot of our clients, I think, come into the process like, this is the budget we want to be at and let's try to keep it exact. And the reality of the situation is there's so many things that affect your budget and so many things that change it throughout the course of the planning. So even when you book your big key vendors, there's things that will change it throughout that time. So we really are very upfront with them too that a budget range is more ideal. Like when we have a client that's like, we want to have it be $75,000. Okay, great. But like, what does that really look like? We need more of a range. Like if you want the final number to be 75, we really need to book your vendors more at like 60 to 65 to honestly give us like a $10,000 wiggle room, which sounds crazy, but most weddings, that's what you need. Because when you add like gratuity and tip and tax and like a little upgrade here, a little upgrade there, oh, we're going to hire now like a beer vendor to do, that's where that money comes from. So we're pretty frank and open with them about, is there a final number and how flexible is that? And we have some clients like, that is the final number. We cannot go beyond that. Great. Then we're paring back $10,000 or $50,000 less from the start and then giving us that wiggle room. If they're like, that's our number, but there is wiggle room above that, then typically it tends to go a little bit over. But it's their decision. They make the decision on what they spend the money on and what they don't. We don't spend their money for them. We guide them.
Got it.
All right, so let's wrap this up. We've been going for an hour 26.
Wow.
Yeah, it's fast.
It's fast. Let's just go through your Instagram a little bit and
pick apart our work. Here
talk
we go.
about
No, I
it.
was kidding.
No, we're not gonna pick apart it. We want to talk about
No, it looks great
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah, your feed is very on point.
Yeah, we try to share, like, we have a whole thing of doing, like, 6 or so images from each wedding. That was a really fun wedding.
This
So
one?
are you showing, is this, like, live? People can see this as you're doing this or not?
No.
Okay, I was like, what are they looking at? Yeah, this was a wedding we did for Sarah and Zach. Sarah is actually the editor of Philadelphia Wedding Magazine. And so she's obviously very involved in the wedding industry, but hadn't planned a wedding herself. So this was a really fun one that we did. And same thing, we really work with them on making their wedding feel uniquely theirs. So what you'll see as part of that 6 images is right above that, you'll see these ping pong paddles that we did. So Zach really has a thing for ping pong, and him and his dad had a love for ping pong together. So we brought in a ping pong table to their venue at La Peg, and we did these custom ping pong paddles. We put Zach's face on a paddle and on the ball, which his friends thought were hilarious because all night they were like hitting his face on the ball. So it was like, people were like, this is the best thing ever. And it was actually the bride's idea. She was like, we talked about doing ping pong, and then she's like, can we put Zach's face on ping pong ball and on the paddle? I was like, we absolutely can. Same thing you were talking about, Dan. We just like, yeah, we could figure out how to do that. So we did it, and it was really fun. So again, this was a really fun wedding that felt uniquely them and something that obviously you don't walk in off into a wedding and see a ping pong table with custom paddles. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you do a lot of events with like activities?
Yeah,
Because I feel
so-
like a lot of weddings, like in my opinion, like you go
I'll
there,
tell you
you
about
sit
this.
down, you eat,
Yep.
and then you leave, and it's
yeah,
like
so we're big fans of not doing that. So we get a lot of our clients that say to us, and I don't know where this came from, so I want to like put a stop to this right now. People say to us, well, the most important thing is to have a packed dance floor. And I literally am like, why? Why is that the most important thing in your wedding day? Why is that what you want people to take out of it? And it's because they like dancing. And listen, I like dancing too. But that's usually not the thing that's memorable about a wedding to most people.
Because everyone dances at all weddings.
You always dance at every wedding, and dancing's fun. But you can dance at like anywhere on a weekend if you want to. And so it's not to me really that memorable. And I think it's important to have really good band if that's important to you and have great dancing. But again, that's not an experiential thing, right? That's just dancing. So if we have that, great, but we typically try to have something else, especially for the non-dancers as your group, having those other elements like a cigar bar or a cocktail area or ping pong or a lounge they can sit over here. We have a couple coming up this year, a wedding Jessie's doing, where they really like board games, and people know this about them. Like, you go to their home and they play board games. So we're literally setting up lounges with board games out at their wedding because that's a thing they do, and they don't really want to dance that much. They want to have dancing, but it's not their priority. So, and even clients where dancing is a priority, great, but like when people need a break from dancing, what are they doing, know? And so it's really thinking about what are those things that are, again, creating that flow for what's important to them for that evening.
Did you ever have like something more raw, like a high school party if there's a bunch of kegs and like beer pong and stuff like that?
Yeah. So summer weddings are at homes where like private homes where the rules are like not as stringent as venues. A lot of venues you can't do like shots, for example, and things like that because of liquor liability. But when you're at your house, the line blurs a little bit. So yeah, I mean, we've definitely had weddings at private homes that tend to get a little bit rowdier because the lines get a little bit blurred as well. And especially in the late night crowd, it definitely changes a little bit to like things getting a little crazy. Yeah.
Oh, that's actually a good question. What's
after parties?
Yeah, if they're like after party, how long, like how far into the night, like has a wedding gone? Like, have you thrown ravers or ragers like before?
So it's really dependent on the wedding. So again, if they're at a venue, if they're at a private home, what's happening? We're really big fans of after parties, but it's knowing the timing. Like if your wedding's sitting at midnight in say like Philly or New York or something, well, most bars they have to shut the bar at 1:30. People have to be out by 2. So if you're ending at midnight and you're at a farther away venue to get back to your hotel or where the after party is, it might not be till 1 o'clock. Well, there's just not a lot of time left, right? So people also get nervous because they always think, well, I don't want my wedding to end at 10. That's so early if their venue has some restrictions. But my point is actually start your day earlier, end it earlier, and then have time for the after party. If you end your wedding really late, it starts late, it ends, but then there's no time for anything else after it.
Got it.
So I don't think it's bad to have your wedding end at 10 or 11 to give you that time for that after party after. So usually we end, some venues have restrictions on ending at 10. I would say our average weddings end around 11, and then it gives us time for after party from like 11 to 1 a.m. or by the time they get back to the hotel, like 11:30 to 1:30, and then they're kind of getting that 2-hour after party.
Cool.
Okay, so do you have any other questions? 'Cause I want to make this the last.
Like really about the after party, yeah.
All right, so
last question. Here.
Last question. So when I plan on getting married, I think I'm going to hire.
Call me. Yeah.
Sure, but I'm going to hire like one of the bands that I used to listen to, like back in the day, to come because I'm sure they're not that expensive on the grand scheme of like it's not like I'm hiring Elton John, right?
Yeah.
So have you ever been to an event where someone like famous has come played or like slightly famous, like
Great question. Yeah, I haven't yet to that scale, which I would love to have that happen at some point. Though I have been involved in other famous people's weddings, the other planning companies that I've been to, that I worked with. But yeah, I think, the other part of it too, well, the famous part is obviously the big one, but the other part of this is also hiring friends to be a part of the wedding is a very slippery slope if they're not actually wedding professionals. So that's like a whole other conversation we could get into. But the biggest side is that if clients of ours are having friends are involved, I ask really serious questions about how professionally do they do that skill set and how, and will they take it professionally? Do you know what you're getting for that? I need to have a conversation with them. I need to make sure they're actually going to do it the way that the client's expecting.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's a big piece of it too. But yeah, it'd be really fun to have like a professional. But we get a lot of, we've had, a lot of the Philly mascots at weddings. That's a big thing. Mummers at weddings, things like that. So that's probably the extent. Thing? Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Gritty is making some showcases at weddings. The Philly Fanatics been to a wedding of ours. So definitely those we get a lot of too. But we've definitely had a lot of famous guests at weddings, some which we cannot mention, and we've been involved in some famous people's wedding planning.
Awesome.
Cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Awesome. Yeah. All right. So thank you guys so much for tuning into another episode of the Creative Collective Show. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. Follow us on Instagram and Facebook at StrixMedia NJ. Where can they find you? Tell everyone.
Yeah. So again, if you're in the market for wedding planning help, or if you just want to follow along for some pretty stuff, you can find us on Instagram at Clover Event Co, on Facebook /Clover Event Co, and check out our website clovereventco.com.
Hell yeah. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us. Yeah. You dropped some fire knowledge. I'm sure our listeners are really going to get a lot of tidbits out of this one.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. It's been fun chatting with you today.
Hell yeah.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.